Nice outfit, guys. Hello and welcome to Telewizja Republika. In a recent address, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has outlined the strategic goal of the Ukrainian military's operation in Russia's Kursk Oblast. The goal is to create a buffer zone on Russian territory and to weaken Russian military capacity. Over the past 2 weeks, Ukrainian forces have gained control of around 1,000 square kilometers and over 80 settlements in the region. Ukrainian forces have also destroyed key bridges, significantly disrupting Russian logistical operations, including a bridge over the same river, as reported today by Ukrainian outlets, further complicating Russian resupply efforts. In the past week, Russia has escalated its missile and drone attacks on Ukraine, launching over 40 missiles, 750 guided bombs, and 200 drones targeting Ukrainian cities and military positions. Some of these attacks came in front of the aforementioned Kursk Oblast. This shows why the UA operation there is crucial. On August 18, Kyiv endured its third ballistic missile attack this month, with North Korean-made missiles reportedly involved. Despite the intensity of these assaults, Ukraine's air defenses successfully intercepted all the missiles and drones, preventing civilian casualties. In an attempt to divert attention from Ukraine's offensive, notorious war criminal Vladimir Putler visited Azerbaijan. The visit, aimed at discussing regional issues with President Ilham Aliyev, comes as Moscow faces unprecedented military challenges on its own soil. The talks reportedly focused on the conflict between Azerbaijan and Armenia, which is further complicating Russia's strained regional influence. Meanwhile, Belarus has moved a significant portion of its army, nearly one-third, to the Ukrainian border. Belarusian dictator Alexander Lukashenko claims this redeployment was in response to a perceived Ukrainian military buildup, which he attributes to misinterpretation of Belarusian military exercises. Misinterpretations for what? Some might wonder if the Ukrainian offensive had anything to do with these moves. Germany's commitment to supporting Ukraine has come under scrutiny following reports from Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung that Berlin may reduce future aid, while the German Foreign Ministry has denied plans to cut assistance. Concerns remain over Berlin's long-term commitment, especially given its historical, let's put it this way, inclination towards restoring relations with Russia. Not only reset policies of Angela Merkel, not only Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, not only Gerhard Schröder, but also a Ribbentrop-Molotov pact that is hardly mentioned in the German Foreign Ministry that I visited a few weeks ago. There is a great banner at the entrance showing the history of 20th century from the position of Germany. Guess what? Second World War is hardly mentioned there, and Ribbentrop-Molotov pact is not mentioned at all over there. So, no surprises, and when we hear news from the German media, which is unofficially just part of the German official apparatus, I think we should pay attention to what the German media is saying unofficially, because there might be some deep knowledge which is much more precise than the official denials of the spokespeople or ministers of the German government. So that's what we are going to talk on my show. You can find us on rockrachon.com. That's our website. That's our Substack over there. You can leave us your email. We'll get back to you with our reports on what's going on in this part of the world and on other front lines of the ongoing war against the West. My name is Michał Rachon. This is Rock Rachon. And we rollin'. So, it's Monday, and that means that Joe Lindsley is back again on Telewizja Republika. Joe, great to see you again. We haven't seen each other for quite a while, and boy, I mean, The Kursk offensive used to mean something totally different in the wartime history of Europe. Now we got new Kursk offensive. What do you make of the whole thing that is going on the territory of Russia right now, and how does it influence the Russian aggression against Ukraine on one hand and spirits in Ukraine on the other?
Well, I mean, it's remarkable, Michał. For more than 12 days, Ukrainians have been advancing steadily into Russian territory, on Russian soil, and it's sustained. And you look at Russian cities, small cities and villages in Kursk, and it's very important to remind people the difference between 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine with its full-scale invasion. Remember the images of grandmothers and, you know, all kinds of people making Molotov cocktails, people standing up to the tanks in the street, people arming themselves to the teeth here in Kyiv or in Kharkiv. There is nothing like that. We don't see anything like that in the Kursk region at all. Many people have fled. They abandoned people, and the Ukrainian military are giving food and water to Russian civilians who are left behind. If you look at, you know, even as recently as May, when Russians made the incursion into Kharkiv region, they do it by carpet bombing cities. None of that is happening. Ukrainians are using precise weapons, some of them supplied by the West, to precisely hit military targets, and they're giving food and water to the civilians. An interesting thing, you know, one reason why the military has to be giving food and water to civilians in Russia is because many international organizations who are here in Ukraine, they are afraid of crossing into Russia following the Ukrainian military, because Russia has been threatening that they will prosecute anyone who crosses that border. They will prosecute them under international law. And so even though Russia obviously has fundamentally broken international law by invading Ukraine, still the foreign organizations that are here to help, they feel that threat from Russia. And so it falls to the Ukrainian military not only to sustain the advance in Kursk region, but also to care for the civilians who've been neglected and left behind, these Russian civilians. But here's what we see in so many recent interviews I see with American and British media of Ukrainians. They say, okay, you've done this, but when are you going to win? What is victory? And they're always just pushing for that big question. And I think here's what we see, what I think everyone here knows well. Victory is imagine like you're like a fat person eating potato chips on the couch, and you have a goal of running a marathon or climbing a mountain. There's a lot of things you got to do in between. And so it's a process of first saying, I'm going to get up, I'm going to walk a block, I'm going to take these small steps. And then you begin to see, with every week, every month of progress, you see new possibilities of what you can do. It's the same in the war. You don't just win things easily. And so what we see here, this advance into Kursk, Ukrainians, after 2.5 years, they've improved, they've removed a lot of the Soviet structure within their military. A lot of it's still there, but they've made many improvements. They figured out how to use drones in a smarter way. They've got the better weapons. And now they have this amazing advance with minimal resistance into Russia. And so what this shows is the possibility that Ukrainians can do more and more extraordinary things. And after almost 2 weeks now, there's no major Russian response. And what is very, I think, disturbing is if you look at the response of the White House. A few days ago, Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary, she was asked, hey, are you at last going to allow Ukraine to use American weapons to hit Russian military bases from which Russia attacks Ukrainian cities? Because, while Russia can't protect its own territory on the ground, they can still throw missile temper tantrums and send missiles from deep into Russia into Ukrainian cities. And that's continuing. And so reporters are asking the White House, hey, Ukraine is succeeding in so many ways. Can you just let Ukraine get the job done and let them hit these Russian military bases? And here is the response. We haven't heard anything from President Biden. He is going to speak tonight at the Democratic Convention. But it's amazing lack of voice from the White House these past 2 weeks of Ukraine's extraordinary success, except we had these words from the Deputy Press Secretary of the Pentagon. Just because Russia has not responded to something doesn't mean they won't in the future. And that, as long as that is the policy and the voice from the White House, that is a green light to Russia. All you got to do is keep obscuring Ukrainian victories. Whenever Ukraine does something good, try to cover it up, and don't worry, because then you'll give Russia time to resupply and to figure out its next moves.
Yeah, but we can try to look at it also from the other side. I've heard and I've read, I was on a vacation, but everyone who's addicted to the news flow gets those messages even while sitting on a beach. That the Russian representatives of the Russian military, top echelons of or military, the defense ministry of Russia, had problems getting through to their American counterparts in terms of getting some kind of answer. What is going on here? This kind of, I would say, a dead telephone line is also a kind of message, as if U.S. was and the current administration was turning the blind eye on the situation that is taking place right now, as if we would see a message. Okay, do what you want to do. If something's going to happen, we're just going to wash our hands. But on the other hand, if you manage to grab some land, we got no problem with that.
I mean, it does seem, the lack of a official response beyond that quote I just read to you seems to be that this is the policy. We'll kind of let Ukraine do what they want, but still, very crucially, restricting Ukraine. In fact, the Deputy Secretary of the Pentagon, Sabrina Singh, said that they're still worried about escalation, and so they don't believe Ukraine needs to hit Russian military bases. And so what we've seen is that Russia can't defend its own territory, but they are. I mean, they've been pounding the city of Sumy near Kursk, the city of Sumy in Ukraine, with missiles. And Dnipro and other places, because that's an area where the U.S. has sort of created a sanctuary. In fact, just a few days ago, a group of former U.S. generals and ambassadors, sort of a bipartisan group, wrote a letter to President Biden, and they were encouraging him to say, hey, look, President Biden, as of this week with the Democratic Convention, you're sort of giving up your power. It's your swan song. You don't have to worry about politics, so why don't you try to make your legacy count? And he says that this letter from the generals, including General Hodges and Breedlove, retired generals, said, victory means taking out the archer, not defending indefinitely against his arrows. The laws of war are as sufficient for governing Ukraine's defense as they are for governing the conduct of the U.S. military. And what they mean is, as long as Ukraine is only allowed to, do these small incursions into Russia or protect their cities with air defense, but as long as they are prevented from actually hitting the Russian missile launch points, then they're going to be forever vulnerable. And all Russia has to do is buy time to stockpile more missiles from North Korea, and more drones from Iran, and then beat the hell out of Ukrainian cities. And that's what's happening right now. And we do see so many, in some ways kind of comical attempts by Russia to ignore the good news of what's happening in Kursk and to obscure it. For example, there was 2 weeks ago, the tiny fire at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. I think Russians were hoping that would be a major global headline, but everyone realized it was not a real threatening fire. It was a ridiculous attempt to obscure the news cycle. And then we saw a couple of days ago, actually on Sunday, yesterday, the Washington Post had this very bizarre story. Headline, Ukraine's offensive derails secret efforts for partial ceasefire with Russia. So here we have perhaps, a former Washington Post person who used to be based in Moscow, writing this story, finding the most negative interpretation you could possibly find of Ukraine's incredible advance into Kursk. And demeaning it and saying...
You wrote a piece, and you actually published your own X video on that subject. But this is very bizarre, as you just mentioned, because the idea of talks between Russia and Ukraine are always, since the very beginning of this war, as long as Russia keeps the territory of Ukraine in her hands, is actually talking about the conditions of giving up at least part of Ukrainian territory. So whenever we are talking about this kind of discussions, we are indeed talking about the idea of giving up Crimea, giving up Donbass, giving up Luhansk region. And the Kursk incursion changes that situation, at least theoretically, because it opens the possibility of trading land for land. And this, in a way, didn't show up in the piece that you are mentioning.
No, and I think this is where, if we're attuned to this, we see the effects of Russian propaganda. Whenever Ukraine does have the upper hand in a very powerful way, I mean, right now we have a non-nuclear nation that for almost 2 weeks has made an incursion and advance into a nuclear-armed nation that we're supposed to be very afraid of. And we see it, sort of the emperor has no clothes. And yet, that's why, and I think it's no surprise that we start to see all these headlines, saying, "Oh, we should be very afraid of Russia." That's why we have that rhetoric from the White House. It's very weird. Like, why, after 2.5 years of saying we stand with Ukraine as long as it takes, why would you not be giving some kind of, as you would say, like close air support to Ukraine in a metaphorical way, and saying, "Wow, we're so proud of these guys. Look what they're doing. This is a moment of momentum. Let's get the Republicans and others to wake up and say, hey, everything we've done is paying off in an extraordinary way. And now it's almost 2 weeks and there's no nuclear holocaust. Like, how long do we have to wait until we can say, hey, this works? Do we need to wait 5 years? Like, does Ukraine need to hold Russian land for 5 years? And then we can say, oh, maybe actually Ukraine is getting stronger and Russia is getting weaker. This is where I think once again.
So could you try to, and what's the view? What is the way you view those messages that come from Germany? As we are speaking about the fundamental change in terms of geopolitics of Central Europe, in a way, we are talking about changes in the geopolitical landscape after the Second World War, because there was no situation of this kind when Russia was basically invaded, at least at some slim part of its territory. We are hearing from Germany first the news that Chancellor Scholz decided to deny all the requests from Ukraine. Then we've heard, after those news were broken, that actually they do not do this kind of thing. Whatever we think about it, it is bizarre again. I mean, again, we are talking about the state which is officially a second supplier of the support for Ukraine, doing everything it can not to help Ukraine beat Russia.
Well, I think if we look at, and I've been in Ukraine every moment of these 2.5 years of Russia's full-scale war, whenever Ukraine is really getting the hell kicked out of it, like when Kharkiv was being pummeled last May, that's when we hear beautiful and strong words from the West, saying, oh, we stand with the Ukrainians against these horrible attacks. But when Ukraine, and as long as it takes, but when Ukraine is actually doing something decisive to move toward victory, when Ukraine has Russia on its heels, all of those voices that said as long as it takes are totally silent. And this is the question we have to ask. Why? Do they not want Ukraine to win? Is it because of oil? I mean, there's a lot of different, but we all need to start asking why. Why are the people who are so adamant about Ukraine when Ukraine is being beat up, why are they almost totally silent when Ukraine is not only pushing back, but doing something that is extraordinary? I mean, there's not been a foreign army on Russian soil since World War II. And there's not even a peep about it from the political class. Are they afraid of people who actually have freedom having the upper hand? Or maybe it has to do with the oil and gas situation. And we have to remember, in 2019, there's a lot of questions about how Trump would react to Ukraine and what he would do. In 2019, Trump approved sanctions on Russia and anyone who helped Russia build the Nord Stream pipeline to Germany. And it was Biden who reversed those sanctions. Ostensibly, he did it because they were trying to say, well, Trump ruined our reputation in Europe. He pissed off Angela Merkel. And so Joe Biden repaired that relationship by removing the sanctions against Russia on the pipeline. But does the pipeline have something to do with this? Does the gas have something to do with this? It is so bizarre to see this behavior of people that would gladly wave the Ukrainian flag when cities are being burned, But then once Ukrainians start to turn the tide, they are silent, and they're and not only silent, but continuing to restrict support. And then again,
I mean, this is the same. Joe, this is the same government that announced and gave the information to the Ukrainian ambassador in the first days and the first hours of this invasion. You are going to be doomed, and you are not going to exist as a state within the next 24 hours. This is the same state that had its intelligence chief caught or actually trapped in territory of Ukraine in the first days of this invasion, as if that's at least the official story. As if the German intelligence didn't expect the invasion, which I truly do not believe. But that brings me to the question, you actually touched upon this. Donald Trump was the US president who effectively was holding sanctions on Nord Stream 2. As long as Donald Trump was president of the United States, Nord Stream 2 was not operational. It changed when the president changed in United States. And yet we still see, despite all the decisions that were made by Donald Trump, deploying troops on the eastern NATO flank in Poland, opening the gas shell and the shell oil transfer to Europe, supporting the Three Seas initiative. Those are the three things that, from the perspective of a state like my home country, like Poland, are totally anti-Russian and totally breaking the ideas of the Russian strategy of domination over Europe and ultimately over United States. So what is the reason for which Donald Trump is being framed constantly as an allegedly pro-Russian politician, since he, as a president of the United States, proved something opposite? What do you make of it?
Well, I think the reasons that were applicable a few years ago will take a long time to discuss. But right now, the reality is that many people close to Trump, I think, as you know, I mean, you were just in America, because they're not looking at this deeply. And because they think that Joe Biden has been supporting Ukraine, they believe the conspiracy theories that, Biden is here to profit from Ukraine. And so because anyone who supports Ukraine, as long as Biden seems to support Ukraine, people close to Trump are going to say we need to oppose Ukraine. And so Ukraine has actually become this football for silly politicians on the left and the right, abusing the people who are actually willing to die for freedom. And so I think the situation now with many people close to Trump, they don't have courage on this topic. They're only looking in a very small-minded way at like the weekly political situation in America. There is a lot, I guess the hope for Ukrainians is that if you look at Kamala Harris, who said nothing, she hasn't even done an interview yet since she became the nominee, and Trump, neither of them have a good, convincing policy for Ukrainian victory. And so maybe if one of them, let's say, if the Trump camp starts to find, say, hey, we actually believe in defending the free people of Ukraine. Russia is, Russia has their corrupt tentacles all over Washington. We want to break free from this. If they get strong about it, maybe Kamala Harris will copy that, as she did with the policy on no taxes on tips. And then the hope is that this would push. Right now, Ukraine's not even in the conversation in American politics during the election, which is astounding. The largest war in Europe since World War II, not even in the conversation. And so the hope is that, at least one of the candidates might start talking about it, and that'll push the other one to do it.
Oh, that's very
right now.
Could you emphasize on that? Because actually, this is a brilliant thought. We know that this is the case that was being discussed before the actual presidential campaign began. But since this campaign began, actually, no one mentions words Ukraine. I was watching the Republicans' convention in Milwaukee personally. Ukraine was mentioned once by Tucker Carlson, of course, in a negative way, as Tucker Carlson's views are perfectly known to our viewers. But the name of the state was mentioned once. Why?
Well, I think it's because it's something that people are not. You can use Ukraine easily to attack your opponents. We've seen J.D. Vance do that. Without going into the facts, he uses Ukraine to attack Biden. The base is going to be happy. You don't have to spend energy or intellect to explain stuff. That's a sad state of our American politics. Secondly, I think there's probably a lot of money. And again, back to the oil. Right now, there's an American oil company, Schlumberger, SLB. They're expanding their energy operations into Russia. a Texas-based oil field services company, as the Financial Times reported, is expanding its operations in Russia. So for all the talk of sanctions from the White House, it's all nonsense. The White House still gives waivers to 10 Russian banks because they do business with companies like this Texas oil services business. So the oil industry in Russia is protected, and the money and the oil are flowing. And what we need to do is say which American politicians are benefiting from that. Is that why they won't? They'll say they support Ukraine, some of them, until Ukraine starts to win, and then they get quiet. And maybe if some people close to Trump will see a political opportunity and say, wait a second, Biden's not actually supporting Ukraine. Let's call him out on it, and then they can show some leadership. And then maybe that'll trickle down to Kamala Harris, and she'll say, well, I'll be the stronger leader. But right now, there is an opportunity to lead here, and Ukrainians they've made the opportunity. They're on the ground in the Russian Federation doing something extraordinary that we're going to see movies about in 10, 15 years. And all, an American politician has to do is to sit, in the style of American politics, take credit for that and lead on it and say, we're going to give you everything you need to get this job done, because we're almost there. And at the point of almost getting to the summit of the mountain, everyone is totally quiet. And this does tell me that I think those elites who say they support Ukraine are actually terrified of free people who cannot be controlled, being armed, being well armed, and being totally dedicated to freedom. And so I think this message would resonate with people, whether they're in France or the US, who are frustrated with the system. Ukraine shows you that free people amazingly can win. And Michał, do you remember, I'm sure, your current foreign minister, when he was foreign minister in 2014 of Poland, during Ukraine's Maidan revolution, he was trying to negotiate between the protesters and the pro-Kremlin government. And he told the protesters, you better make a deal or you're all going to die. And the Ukrainian people said, we don't care. We're going to be free. And to some degree, Sikorsky was right, because now, we see what Russia does when you try to resist. We face ballistic missiles here every day. But Ukrainians say, we're going to stand to be free. We're not afraid of death. And this is what should inspire the heart of America. And all this is being ignored by our political class, by our media, by the Tucker Carlsons and Joe Rogans. And so I hope somehow what Ukrainians are doing in Kursk can somehow break through into some of these political minds in America and say, hey, this is a powerful story. We can, in our political laziness, we can at least attach ourselves to it and use it as something inspiring. Because I think the one thing America really needs these next months, America needs to feel good. We got to feel that we can do something good. And America has contributed to this success. I mean, these are American tools that Ukrainians are using against a totalitarian regime. And so that slaughters Christians, that bombs churches. This is what Russia does. They bomb churches, they kidnap children, and they destroy cities. There's no freedom of speech.
I mean, they do what Russia was always doing against the free nations, against the nations that wanted to break free out of the Russian prisons, because Russian imperia, all the imperias that Russia used to create are basically the prisons of nations, and the Ukrainians are breaking out of this prison right now. And that reminds me of many histories and many struggles, uprisings, and bloody fights that my nation, Poles, were fighting against Russia and against Germany very often in the same time, exactly to break free. And the support of the United States was the support that was fundamental in getting back those our freedoms. It happened in the beginning of the 20th century. It happened at the end of the Cold War, and I think that is very important for American citizens to realize that being a global superpower comes with a price, and this price is backing up nations and states that support US, Ukraine, surely Poles surely many other nations in Central Europe. And I'm glad that you mentioned Radek Sikorski, who is a high figure in the East Coast political elites of USA, liberal elites, and he is one of the authors of the reset policy of resetting relations with Russia. And those words in 2014 were faced by the Maidan, who refused to take this advice because the price is the liberty and freedom and existence of the Ukrainian state and nation. Joe, thanks a lot. 1 minute for you for our fundraising, because we didn't have the time to do it for some time. So what are we trying to get to the people who are fighting for their freedom right now?
Well, first, let's say, can you imagine Churchill or FDR or Reagan saying, just because the tyrant hasn't responded to something doesn't mean the tyrant won't respond in the future.
Yeah.
We got to remember that's what we're facing. Yeah, so here we welcome support at UkrainianFreedomNews.com for the guys at the front, the guys making the advances. And we're focused on buying FPV drones and other equipment to enhance the drones that Ukrainians are using. So we appreciate all support because for the nature of how these drones are being used. That must be through our PayPal option at UkrainianFreedomNews.com.
You can find it on the website that Joe just mentioned. We see each other next week. Joe, stay safe. All the best to you.
Michał, dziękuję.
Ladies and gentlemen, we come back with this show. Tomorrow, you'll find us on rockrachon.com. You'll find our Substack account over there. If you leave us your email, we'll get back to you with our reports on what's going on, not only on this front line of the ongoing war against the Western civilization. Stay safe. Ciao, ciao. Bye.